In the autumn of 1969, I was a 24-year-old production lackey at Warner Brothers, spending most of my daylight hours in the cavernous belly of Studio 16. By then, I'd clocked 3 years in the industry, just enough time to have my wide-eyed idealism stripped away, but not quite enough to kill the fire in my gut. I was a Burbank local, the kid of a stagehand from the old RKO days. I'd learned the gears and pulleys of Hollywood artifice long before I ever cracked a geometry textbook. I knew the chasm that existed between what the lens captured and the messy reality behind it. That distinction mattered. It's why I realized exactly what I was looking at that particular Wednesday, or perhaps Thursday, evening in October. The date is a blur, but the atmosphere isn't. The Santa Ana winds were screaming in from the desert, charging the air with a dry, electric tension that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. The man who wasn't there. I'd first crossed paths with Bruce Lee earlier that spring. He was drifting around the lot as a fight choreography consultant, a fancy title for a man essentially trying to beg the gatekeepers to notice him. The 1969 reality for Bruce was a grind. Enter the Dragon was a lifetime away. The Green Hornet was a ghost in the rearview mirror. He'd played the sidekick, the loyal shadow meant to stand a respectful pace behind the leading man. He was considered a useful asset, but never the main event. I remember his arrival. He was compact, which caught everyone off guard. People projected a giant onto him because of that tectonic energy he threw off. But in the flesh, he stood maybe 5'7". Lean, unassuming. Then he'd pivot and catch your gaze, and suddenly, physical dimensions felt like a joke. His eyes weren't like ours. Most people's eyes, even the powerful ones, are constantly flickering, calculating, or performing. Bruce's eyes were a dead calm at the center of a hurricane. We first spoke outside stage 9. I was lugging a mountain of script changes. He was waiting for an executive who was 20 minutes late, a polite way of saying the meeting was canceled. I offered him coffee from my thermos. We stood in the California sun for 15 minutes talking about nothing. His daughter, Shannon, had just been born, and he had that specific radiant exhaustion unique to new fathers. In the following months, I became a permanent fixture wherever he worked. I wasn't the only one. He had this gravitational pull. When he'd break down a movement for the stunt guys, he wasn't just talking about punching, he was explaining the very architecture of human conflict. Yet the industry remained blind. I sat in meetings where executives talked about him like he was a piece of the set, explaining with total certainty why a Western audience wouldn't buy a lead Asian. The man who eventually forced the issue was Carl DeHaven. Carl was 41, a seasoned stunt veteran with 20 years of broken bones to prove he wasn't a fake. The problem was Carl's era was dying, and he could feel the cold breath of the future on his neck. He represented the old guard, the wide, theatrical swings, and the John Wayne rhythm of cinema fighting. Bruce was systematically proving that style was a dinosaur. The spark wasn't a grand insult. It was a producer, now long dead, who casually mentioned during a meeting that Bruce's new way was probably the smarter bet for an upcoming project. To a man like Carl, that wasn't a business decision. It was an eviction notice. The challenge wasn't shouted, it was whispered through the studio's unofficial telegraph system, a private invitation to settle the only question that mattered. Are you a revolutionary, or are you just a good actor? The amber light of stage 4. I'd first found out an hour before the 9 p.m. rendezvous. I'd love to say I hesitated out of professional ethics, but I ran toward stage 4 like my life depended on it. When I stepped inside, the main lights were killed. Only the safety lamps remained, casting an amber glow that bled into the shadows. It smelled of sawdust, old paint, and the stale oxygen of a room that had seen too many long days. There were 8 of us in total, a few PAs, an old-school cameraman named Walt, a script supervisor named Gloria who felt she needed to bear witness, and a mysterious martial artist from the valley who was there for Carl. We hugged the walls, leaving the center of the stage as an empty sanctuary.
Bruce was already there. He wasn't warming up, he wasn't shadowboxing. He just stood in a white shirt and dark pants, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man who had already finished his preparation years ago. Carl entered at 9:03. He was bigger, broader, and moved with the heavy-set confidence of a man who had spent 2 decades as the toughest guy in the room. "Let's find out," Carl said. It wasn't a threat, it was a request for the truth. Bruce didn't bark back. He just smiled, a quiet, almost melancholy expression, and shifted his weight forward by a single inch. The geometry of the real. There is a specific weight to the air before real violence occurs that no film has ever managed to replicate. I've spent my life on movie sets, and I'm telling you, the tension in Stage 4 that night was physical. It felt like the drop in pressure before a massive storm. Carl began to circle. It was a masterclass in tactical movement, measuring distance, testing angles, looking for the frame. He was trying to force Bruce to anchor himself. But Bruce just pivoted like a compass needle, always facing north, giving Carl absolutely nothing to lock onto. "I've trained with the legends, Bruce," Carl said, not as a boast, but to set the stakes. Bruce didn't bark back. He just smiled, a quiet, almost melancholy expression, and shifted his weight forward by a single inch. "I believe you," Bruce replied. His voice wasn't soft, it was quiet. There's a difference. Softness is weak, quietness is certain. Carl's jaw set. "Then let's find out what's real." He launched. Carl was fast, genuinely fast. He threw a sharp lead jab, followed by a heavy rear cross designed to end the night. Dennis, the PA next to me, gasped, but the punch had nothing but air. Bruce didn't parry it, he simply moved 10 centimeters off the axis, and Carl's momentum carried him past his own center of gravity. Bruce's hand didn't block, it guided Carl's arm, and in the same heartbeat, delivered a vertical strike to Carl's ribs. The sound was like a hammer hitting a side of beef. Carl grunted and reset. He tried to change the game, diving low to turn it into a wrestling match. Bruce's knee didn't strike, it became a barrier, a frame that caught Carl mid-plunge. Then, with a touch that looked almost like a benediction, Bruce's hand found the back of Carl's head and funneled all that aggressive forward energy straight into the floor. Carl hit the boards, rolled, and was back up in a second. But the man who stood up was different from the man who had started. His breathing was ragged, and the certainty in his eyes had been replaced by the look of a man trying to solve an equation in a language he didn't speak.